Hello, everybody. Whether you are joining us live right now or you will be watching this at a later time recorded, welcome to our improv, rather quick conversation that we decided to schedule for tonight regarding the state of real estate within New Jersey's bedroom communities. So you guys know me as Carla Labianca, the co-admin of SOMa at Home. My day job, as you also know, is a realtor with Coldwell Banker, and I'm one half the partnership of Danbrot Labianca, and my real estate partner and I, along with our managing broker Michael Pennisi, are going to be conducting a deep dive into what's going on in real estate right now. I know a lot of you have a lot of questions, right, Lisa?
Yeah, absolutely. And this was specifically in response to some questions that have come up recently in our spheres and our communities, because the market is sort of extreme and people are experiencing that fully and want to know some stuff. So yeah, and thank you so much, Michael Pennisi, our managing broker, for joining. He's got, his finger on the pulse in so many different ways and so much information to share. So we're really fortunate to have him aboard.
Yeah, Michael, why don't you take it away and introduce yourself?
No, I just want to say thank you. It's really an honor to be on here with you guys. I have tremendous respect for what you do. I'm proud to work with you every day of life, and so no introduction needed. But I just wanted to say thank you, and I'm looking forward to to any questions that come up and helping kind of guide the general public.
Yeah, that is actually a great segue into how this is going to work tonight. If you are joining us live, please feel free to raise your hand, or you can type a question into the chat and I will read it to our panelists. Without further ado, let's jump in. And the first question that I think the three of us would love to talk about is what is going on in real estate, and where are all the listings?
Right.
Where are all the
inventory?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that the best way to talk about this conversation is to look at it with, through the lens of rate of absorption. Mm-hmm. And, I'm a stats guy, as you guys know. And so rate of absorption, what that refers to, it's really a snapshot of, I'm sorry, I thought you interrupted. It's really a snapshot of supply and demand at any given time. So when you look at rate of absorption, like you kind of look at it with certain thresholds in mind. So the thresholds that I look at is anything above 6 months worth of inventory. And what that refers to, just to kind of give you a little bit of a baseline for this, is it looks at if there were no other houses that came on the market, how long would it take for all of the homes that are on the market to be sold? Mm-hmm. And it says and it views it in the way the metric, so to speak, is month supply of inventory. So month supply of inventory, anything above 6 months worth of inventory is considered a buyer's market. It means that there are more buyers than there are, sellers in the marketplace. So buyers have the ability to kind of get away with more in terms of how they negotiate and what have you. When you're at 4 or 5 months of inventory, it's really considered equilibrium. That's if you think supply and demand, it's equilibrium. It's where it's a balanced market. Anything less than 4 months of inventory is considered a seller's market. It means that there are fewer sellers than there are buyers, and buyers are then competing for the homes that are out there. Yeah. So if you look at, I'm just going to use Maplewood as an example, although it's true for many of the towns in our area. If you look at Maplewood for the past 10 years, I did this stat recently and it was whoa, when I saw the statistics, 9 out of the last 10 years have actually dropped rate of absorption. 9 out of the last 10, which is unbelievable. Historically speaking, it's not normal.
Were you surprised to see that, Michael?
I certainly was. Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of probably shocking for you to see.
Yeah, I mean, 9 out of the last 10 years is kind of like a wow moment. I mean, you very rarely see that. At least, I mean, I've been doing this for 15 years. And I started in real estate in 2006, and I've done this at a very high level since. billions of dollars. My operation has sold billions of dollars of real estate, on an annual basis. So I feel like I have a pretty good pulse on what's going on, especially locally. And what I would say is like, I haven't seen that steady rise. Like, even if you go back in history, even before I started in brokerage, you just don't see that. Not 9 out of 10 years. So where are we today is the question. And it's kind of interesting. Like, we're at the point where we have 10 days worth of inventory. Yeah. So, I mean, in my whole career, and this includes back in 2006 when the market was at its like quote unquote height, we've never had 10 days worth of inventory. I mean, it was always higher than that. So you could look at that in many different ways. You could look at that in the positive, in the sense that it's the hottest real estate market I've ever seen, and most people have seen. You could look at that in the negative, in that it's so low inventory wise that it's actually a lot of people, there are a lot of buyers that are desperately trying to buy and just can't buy anything because it's just that type of market. So it's kind of the gift and the curse right now. It's a very unusual market from that perspective, because it's,
Yeah, Carla and I both work with buyers and sellers, obviously. So it's definitely what you say, like, it's that balance. It's the balancing, it's completely out of whack. The buyers, it's painful for the buyers and it's jubilant for the sellers. And it's just not, it's ridiculous. It's
right.
ridiculous.
And Lisa and I, in our newsletters now, one of the things that we're sending out are those stats, Michael. And last week when we were figuring out the absorption rate for Maplewood, South Orange, Millburn, Montclair, wow. I mean, it was really shocking to see how low. I mean, maybe a little too crazy. And so that actually segues to another question. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add one thing that that comes to mind is the question that most people I would be asking, general public should be asking, and certain realtors are feeling this, is, well, if there's such little inventory, why are more sellers not stepping up and saying, hey, I'm interested in coming on the market?
Because they don't feel like they have to. I mean,
well, no, it's not. It's that's a part of it. But like, I'll take it a step further. It's kind of a funny issue. It's like, it's kind of a perpetual cycle that's happening here. Is they have nowhere to buy. They don't know what to buy.
Of course,
they're like, I want to sell. I'm desperately want to sell. Like, I know now's the time, but it's like, what do I go out and buy? And that's something that's like, creating other issues in the market right now. Is this like, it's stagnant because people want to sell but don't know where to go, and because they're not coming on the market because they don't know where to go, they're not supplying inventory for the people that in many cases would be their match. Like, somebody sells this house, they buy the other one, and it kind of works. But that's what's stalling the market right now. And it's just an interesting situation. And, and interest rates and the economy as a whole obviously play a role in all this as well. Yeah. So it's just, I've not seen this market in my career.
Yeah. We definitely are feeling that so many of our sellers are saying, listen, we want to move up. We've grown out of this house. We want to go to the next place. And Lisa and I are always saying, wow, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just play matchmaker? Right? Yeah. There's a person out there for your house, and it would be fabulous. The other thing that I've read, and I don't know if you know the exact stat on this, Michael, but it is over 50% of single family properties in New Jersey are owned by people who are over the age of 65. 2 people living in those households, their children have moved out. That's a lot of inventory that people who don't necessarily need to be in the suburbs are sitting on. And so, when I had my outburst earlier of they don't want to move, there's no urgency, right? There's no, what is it that's going to entice those people to move and maybe retire
it's funny, like I can't speak to the stats behind it, but I very much study, building trends and marketing trends and all that stuff. And one of the things that comes to mind when you say that is, you have this whole generation of people that are are happy where they are. Like, you know, like aging in place is probably the best way to say it, like in, you know, in industry terms. And, you know, the thing is for years and years and years, we had this like kind of like, call it a flight for lack of a better word, but we had this flight to North Carolina and to Florida, like specifically from New Jersey. That was the migration pattern. And what building trends are today, and I'm going to give you an example because it'll hopefully highlight what I'm talking about. Have you ever been to Livingston? If you look at Livingston, they built out Town Center. And what it is Town Center, like anybody who knows that complex knows that it's luxury real estate and there's shopping right there.
Yep, I've showed places there, yeah.
Yeah, so they built out this mixed use complex. And I remember going back, I don't know, it was probably 10 years ago. I was sitting in a residential construction certification course or something like that. And I might be butchering the words, it was years ago, but basically it was a whole course about building trends. And what they spoke about that time is like, you know, the populations of people that used to be the flight and the migration south, they in many ways want to age in place and don't want to leave what's familiar to them, which is, you know, these areas. So one of the problems that we're having that's stalling the market a little bit is the fact that we're a pretty built out area. I mean, there's not a lot of new construction in our area and people want to remain where they are. And there's just not a lot of options. And what's complicating that issue in many ways is the fact that, you know, because of manufacturing costs and how much they've risen with the price of oil and everything else, it doesn't pay for a builder, even if they found a plot of land and they were able to build in today's market, it doesn't pay for them to build a move down buyer type residence. It pays for them to build a $2-3 million place or $1 million plus condo or townhouse. And for that reason, it complicates the market further because people are like, all right, I want to stay local, but I can't buy local.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem. Now, the flip side of that only adds to this issue, and it also speaks to the generational gaps that we've seen, is what we're referring to for the most part are baby boomers. And baby boomers are, you know, they're wealthy. There's a wealthy generation. They've done well. And they've done well. And so they have it's not a need. It's more of, do they want to sell in many instances? And so when there's a lack of need and there's a lack of inventory, and then you couple it with, there's kind of like the other end of the spectrum are millennials. So when you think about this, like you have, you know, baby boomers, you have like Gen X and Gen Y, and then you have millennials, and like Gen X and Gen Y are smaller populations of people. Whereas like as a generation, like when you consider how many people fall into those generations, millennials are a very large generation. They're the largest generation.
They exceed the population of the boomers. Yeah, that's right.
Boomers are large,
I mean, you know, and that brings up such an interesting point, doesn't it? I mean, and I've explained this to some of my sellers and buyers. You've got the boomers and you got the millennials. There's more of them. They own the land, but when they start selling the land, there's still not going to be enough land. There's still not going to be enough property once the boomers are gone, because these guys are bigger. Exactly. And that is just such a fascinating conundrum that we haven't even begun to tackle yet, right?
Yeah.
Because they're just coming into their own now, the millennials. They're just beginning to have the money to buy real estate.
So that's actually the point that I was going to go with is, you know, if you look at millennials, they're entering their buying prime like last year. And by the way, when you look at buying prime, it's like between 30 and 35, right. Like historically speaking, that's the buying prime. It's inched up year after year, but it's really in that range. It's 30 to 35. And when you look at like the millennials now, that's where they are. The majority, the largest amount of millennials are in their buying prime and will be for years to come. So that in itself, when people are like, oh, are we in a, you know, are we in a bubble? Like, I don't have a crystal ball just like you don't. And I can't promise you that this is not the height of the market or this is the height of the market. I don't really know that definitively. And I think anybody who says otherwise, like, really just doesn't get that, like, you know, you can't predict the market. Like the market is what it's going to do what it's going to do.
Absolutely.
But I will say this, like, you know, there are factors that, you know, in the past you could look at that were red flags. So a red flag in 2006 was the fact that not historically, but nationally, when you look at the equity in homes, it was in single digits. Like the average person's equity at that point in time in their home was, I think it was like 6 or 7%. It was somewhere in that range. And now it's like in the 20 percentile, it's like 25, 26%. That's a really good sign. That means people are not being like forced out of their houses for the most part because they have enough equity to sell. They don't have to do a short sale or a foreclosure. So that mixed with this larger population of people coming into the market and like being like very solid buyers, and a lot of millennials make good money. That's the other factor. So it's just an interesting, thing, because when you factor those things, and there's I could go into several other variables if you're interested, but those variables like coming into play, that whole mixing pot leads me to believe that this is a pretty secure market, even though it's, what we would consider inflated in terms of prices are going up. There's a lack of inventory for all those reasons. I have no reason to think that it's going to be substantially worse next year, in terms of, the, price point, let's call it. There's no indicator that would predict that at this point. It doesn't mean that it won't happen. It's just it doesn't seem that way.
Yep. So how do you think the interest rates are going to impact this particular trend that we're in right now?
So if you would have asked me this a few weeks ago, I probably would have had a different answer. What's going on in Ukraine is kind of a whole different, it's thrown a curveball at all of this. If you would have asked me before, all of Russia invading Ukraine, I would have said interest rates are going up, and they're going to go up pretty steadily. I personally think that they would go up over the course of a year's time, 1%. And, sometimes people, I would say that and people would be like, you're crazy. But historically speaking, we've been more recently, we were hovering in the high. When you look at from the 1700s to today, interest rates on average are 6%. So, there's still, if you think about it, is there room for growth in interest rates? Well, if you look at history, yes, there's a lot of room. If you consider it from the perspective of, inflation, let's go there. Inflation is happening. We're seeing the highest inflation rates that we've seen in 40 years. The way to fix inflation is to raise interest rates.
Exactly.
So it kind of there's a lot of pressure on the Fed, and in turn, the Fed, it controls the discount rate, and the discount rate it's not a one-to-one ratio, but it has a great deal of impact on what banks are charging. And so knowing that, I don't know, all indications would tell me that they're going to raise rates, and the Fed has just outright said it. They made it clear that they're going to raise rates.
Yep.
So all of that, being true, then you have Ukraine and, gas prices and, everything that's going on right now. I think that there's a lot of pressure on, do we raise rates, and does it have an impact on the economy, and what impact does it have, and the fear of war, and all these different things. I can't say this with absolute anything, nothing's absolute, but I think that if anything, rates are going to rise, but I just don't think they're going to rise to the rates that they probably would have risen if it wasn't for Ukraine.
Yeah, I agree with that. In fact, I've heard a few economists speak on that too, Michael. Echoing similar sentiments. Yeah, they were going to go up. Now we think they're going to, maybe stay steady, maybe raise a little bit. So I've even heard some people say come down again. Like you say, we don't have a crystal ball, but you're absolutely right. Yeah. The war in Ukraine really has changed the game for interest rates. Yeah,
big change. And, so here's an interesting stat that most people don't even think about, but historically speaking, and I study all this stuff because I'm a nerd when it comes to real estate, but when you look at historically speaking, as interest rates jump, it actually
talking about this. We were just talking about this as things start to like maybe settle for sellers a little bit. I mean, I don't know if you would go along with this, but it seems as though, you know, over the past couple of years that we broke the ceiling, right? We've been going up past the ceiling for quite a while, and, you know, over the past couple of years, and seems like it's continuing to do so at this point, but like at some point, it's probably going to level a little bit. I mean, I know these are all speculations, but, you know, Carla and I were just talking, like, when our sellers will go to market is when they really see that things are not going as far up as they were.
It's going to light a fire. Yeah.
This would be my pulse on it. I actually think that this is a very unique market in that, and the first time that I've ever seen this market in my lifetime, maybe like, well, you know, beyond my lifetime, you know, if you go back and you look at this, I personally think that this is the one market that I've ever seen where there's a legitimate argument to be made that it could be worse a year from now for buyers and for sellers. And that they usually don't go in line with one another. Like if you think about it, normally, like if prices are high, it's great for sellers, it's bad for buyers. If prices are low, like it's great for buyers, it's bad for sellers. So I'm going to explain this. We are at the lowest inventory levels that I've ever seen, and
hands down,
you can't go lower than we currently have. Like it's just not like you would have no houses on.
It'd be zero.
Yeah, so that's not happening. Like there's always going to be some people, if you think about it, and why I say that with such confidence is like people get relocated, people have to move because their family grows, their family, you know, kids leave the house, like they get divorced, like there's a million different reasons why there's forced moves that happen. So there's always a need, not necessarily a want. So right now, when you talk about like, there have been weeks where we've had 5 houses on the market. Like,
oh my God, South Orange 2 weeks ago, 5 houses on the market. Yeah. Crazy.
So when you have like such low inventory, like there's no going lower. And if there's no going lower, like we have to predict, and I'm not predicting that the market's going to crash. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm predicting that it's going to get worse, so to speak, for a seller, in that there will be more competition moving forward than there is today because you can't go lower. So it has to be an expectation that inventory is going to rise. Like if that's the expectation and inventory does rise, like the question is like, what does that do with price? Well, if you talk basic supply and demand, prices should in theory go down because more supply, same demand, or, you know, comparable demand, like it's, you know, prices go down. I don't know if prices are going to go down, but what I do know is this: they're so inflated in terms of like such extreme competition right now that prices are hitting like these crazy numbers. And by the way, that, you know, I say crazy numbers, but I take it with a grain of salt because, you know, it could be the new normal. It could be.
We say this all the time. This is the new normal. Is it? Could it be?
We don't know. We don't know if it's the new normal or if it's the outlier. Like time tells that. And so, and I think back to myself, and I'm going to continue my point in 1 second, but just to kind of go on a tangent, I bought, you know, I invest in real estate, and I bought several homes throughout my life. 3 of the homes I could point to, and I know off the top of my head, I overpaid for those houses in the market that I bought them in. And I did so willingly. It's not that I didn't know the market. Clearly, I knew the market. I'd study this for a living. Like, but I just felt like, you know what? Regardless of the market, I think that this is the right buy at this time. Like, I felt like maybe I'll pay a little bit of a premium, but I'm going to get the house that I want. And I felt like long-term there was value there. In all 3 of those instances, the house is worth significantly more than what I paid for. And you could have made the argument at the time that I overpaid. So, you know, who's right, who's wrong? It depends.
Michael, what was the time period that you saw them increase in value, or at least make up?
I mean, I call it the last 5 years, depending on like which house. Actually, one house was 10 years ago, and then, you know, in that range. All within the last 10 years, but 2 of them were within the last 5.
I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And so, I mean, now granted, like who would have expected the market to do what it did? And, you know, I mean, nobody could have expected that. So maybe it's good luck. Maybe it was a smart move. I don't know. I'm not trying to take credit, but what I would say is like, you know, when you look at, I remember, this is just a funny aside. My father showed me the house he grew up in. And I was like, what did your father sell it for? Like, and his father sold the house for $56,000. And it was a Brooklyn 3-family. And it was on the market for, at the time, this is years ago, it was on the market for 1.3 million. And I remember, and now it's probably 3 million, forget it. It's like, you know, this is years removed, like, you know, because it's just exploded there. But I thought about it and I'm like, whoa. And at $56,000, they probably were like, look what we did. Like, you know, it's just the nature of the beast. Like it's scarcity. Like I was an econ guy, like, you know, I went to school for econ. And there's scarcity. There's only so much land, populations grow, especially in this area. People want to be, you know, local to, you know, to businesses and what have you. Yeah, New York. And so, I mean, it's just, it happens over time. So it's, you know, if there's one thing that, you know, I heard this adage years ago, and it's just so true. It's like, you know, the whole, like, you know, don't wait to buy real estate and wait. I mean, that I believe in that. I think that like long term,
absolutely,
you're going to do well in real estate. It's a great investment, but it is a long-term investment and you have to view it as such.
Absolutely agree.
But yeah, I know I detoured, but, you know, in terms of, you know, the marketplace and going back that whole theory of like why it would be potentially worse for buyers and sellers moving forward is the thought process that if interest rates do rise, and it seems likely that they will, like that means that the buying power that a buyer has moving forward goes down. Like they could afford less. And what most buyers care about, like they don't think this way, but like ultimately they do once they own the house. What most buyers care about is their monthly payment. Like, can I, you know, what can I afford on a month-to-month basis? Like, can I afford this with my salary? Can I live comfortably? You know, all that comes with that. They all care about price up front. And the funny part is like most people are staring at price and like that's what drives their decision-making. And they don't look so much at interest rates. And I think back to, I'm going to butcher the year, but it was like several years ago when they were trying to, I think it was during the Obama era, but they were trying to get people off the fence and they put out a first-time buyer home credit.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was like a $7,500 towards your taxes. I might be butchering this a little bit as years ago, but it was in that range. And I remember thinking to myself, like all the people that bought at that time, like got $7,500 off of their taxes, which was good. Don't get me wrong. But then like 6 months later, interest rates dropped like significantly. And like the same buyer would have saved $50,000 like if they bought 6 months later because of where interest rates was.
I remember that.
Granted, they could refi. I understand all that, but you know, it's just like interesting. Interest rates, like the stat that always comes to mind about interest rates is for a $500,000 buyer, if interest rates rise by 1%, that's like prices dropping by 17%.
That's right.
And I always think about that. And granted, it depends where interest rates are. The math changes a little bit, but that's universally like, that's a good rule to think of. Well, in history, there's only been 2 times in history that I'm aware of that prices dropped by 17%, the Great Recession and the Great Depression. So, I mean, the likelihood of prices dropping by 17% is very unlikely. Like it's not going to happen.
100%.
The likelihood of interest rates rising by 1%, very likely. Like, you know, it's not a guarantee, but like it's way more likely than prices dropping by 17%. So think about it this way, going back to that whole thought process. If interest rates rise, like naturally, like buyers are now, houses are costing them more money. So it's worse a year from now if interest rates rise for a buyer. All the buyers that are sitting on the fence, it's worse. The question is the ratio of how far do home prices come down? And I can almost guarantee you, I'd bet my house on this, that home prices are not going to drop by 17%. So home prices, let's just say home prices drop by 10%, which again is unlikely.
It's unlikely, yeah.
But like if home prices came down by 10%, that's an equation where buyers would do worse a year from now and sellers would do worse a year from now. And like any negative movement on price is worse for sellers. Like any upward movement on interest rates is worse for buyers. And I think that both of those things are probably likely.
Yeah. Okay. So So let's talk about people who are in the market right now. Let's talk about buyers, because I think that, you know, this is going to be, this recording is going to be beneficial for buyers who want to, you know, like we said in the beginning of the program, get out of the house they're in. They've outgrown it. They want to go to the next thing. You know, Lisa and I, we have many creative ways in our bag of tricks, if you will, to write competitive offers, so that, you know, our buyers can get those houses. But, you know, it's still difficult, because it's still the thing, Michael, that, you know, we have to tell people is that you're going to have to pay, or not going to have to pay, but if you want this house, you're going to have to pay to play. And, you know, we're not about telling people what to do with their finances or anything like that. But, you know, what do people want to hear now? I mean, you know, I don't know that there's an easy way out of this other than, you know, doing the best you possibly can. What other strategies can we come up with?
I don't know how much you're going to love these answers, but I'm going to give you the truth.
Go for it, please.
For context, I think that this is a good way to start. So it's really nice for me to shout out all these answers. And, you know, if I'm somebody viewing this, like, the question I would have is like, how does this guy know? Like, well, in the marketplace, the way Coldwell Banker operates is we never allow a conflict of interest. So we never allow an agent, a listing agent who is representing the seller, to also represent a buyer in the same transaction and negotiate both sides.
Yep.
So because of that rule, it's legal in New Jersey, but we just don't allow it as a general policy because it avoids a lot of conflict. Yep. So what we do is, like, I have more experience than most listing agents, you know, at this point, probably all listing agents that are in our office. And, you know, knowing that they put, like, I'm always in place of the seller. So in those instances, I represent the seller. What that triggers, like, I have 300 agents that, you know, that work with me, you know, up and down the train line, and we do thousands of transactions a year. Yep. So naturally, like, you have to imagine that triggers a lot of me being on the seller side of negotiations. You know, it's like depending on the year, it's between 18 and 20% of our deals are multiple offers with the agent involved. So I'm negotiating multiple offers, you know, multiple times a week, most weeks, for the last 10 years. So I'd make the argument, and I don't think I'm wrong by this, that there's nobody in this marketplace or anywhere around here that negotiates more multiple offers than I do. Mm-hmm. And with that in mind, and I say that because that's our business policy. We're also the market leader in the area. And, you know, we happen to be one of the best Coldwell Banker offices in the state. So I feel very comfortable saying what I just said, like, that's the domino effect. Knowing that, like, I see a lot of offers, and I take notice. I'm very observant about what the trend.
I know. I love this. I love this. I love this. I love when you talk about this stuff. I always find it so fascinating.
Well, I mean, to me, like, it tells the story. So,
yeah, it's so good.
You know, if you look at the marketplace for years and years and years, people were like, cash is king. And, like, I'm coming in with cash and I'm going to win the offer because I have cash. And I kind of laugh when people take that approach. And it's not that I'm trying to be disrespectful to somebody's financial situation one way or the other. But when you talk about cash is king in today's world, well, you know, 40% of the deals that we have are either cash or a waived appraisal, 40%. So, you know, when you're somebody that's, you know, coming in with, and I'm not being disrespectful or dismissive of any parties, so don't take it the wrong way. But when you're somebody that's coming in with cash and you're like, I could come $50,000 below asking because I'm cash, like, you're not even in consideration. Like, you're not even you're done.
Nope. Everybody, yeah, so, I mean, Michael, you said this earlier in the program. Millennials, the people who are the buying population today, they're incredibly well vetted. They have great jobs. There are procedures put in place from the Great Recession that make it very difficult to get a bad loan, and something that's not going to pass muster. So yeah, we laugh at that too.
But you got to remember, they're also the children of baby boomers, and baby boomers are also a wealthy generation.
Right.
And those people, in many instances, like if the kids don't have the funds, the parents do, and will put the funds. And I realize that not everybody is like, is born into that situation. I'm respectful of that. Like, again, I'm not trying to diminish anybody, but like, you have to be real about the context of the market. Like, because otherwise you're doing a disservice to everybody, because if you're not telling them the truth about it, they may feel like they have some undue advantage that they don't really have. And it costs them homes that they really want. So,
100%.
For me, like, the first standard that I tell people is, if you're like, I'm just going to make up numbers for the sake of this conversation. If you're coming in on a $400,000 house and you're offering $500,000 and you're not waiving some form of the appraisal, you're not going to get the house. Like, you're just not going to get the house.
Yep.
And I know that people are like, well, like, why would I waive appraisal? If the house is not worth that, then it's not worth that. What you're not realizing is these bids are very competitive. They're competitive. Like, many times there might be $5,000, $10,000 that separates one buyer from the next. And if you have 5 buyers, I mean, some of these bids, we have 30, 40, I had an offer the other day, we had 49 offers. So when you have 49 offers, like, 20 of them are probably throwaway offers, maybe even more than that.
Yeah.
I understand.
And then doesn't that just sort of like obliterate the idea that the property is not worth that, because buyer determines the market. So if there are that many offers, then like,
good point.
You're correct.
But like, it's value is a nebulous
worth what the buyers are willing to pay. And when you're talking about like a marketplace that we have such low inventory, it's a crazy attractive market. Like, people want to live here in this in the surrounding area. I mean, the reality is it's super competitive. And, if you're not paying a premium and you're not waiving something along the lines of appraisal, you might have to waive appraisal completely, but limiting appraisal. And there's ways to do that. You could say, like, if it has to appraise for list price, or it has to appraise for whatever amount we could afford to bridge the gap on, or whatever. And there's financing terms, like, we have an in-house lender that does a really nice job, that you could pay, like, a mortgage insurance if it under appraises. And instead of making up the difference on 30,000, it might cost you 3,000.
Yeah, that's right.
So there are ways to get around this. I'm not saying that there are not, but it's a mental hurdle for some buyers that say, like, I would never waive appraisal. Like, okay, you don't have to do that, but you're probably not going to get desirable homes in today's market.
Yep.
So, tough pill to swallow for some people. It's the truth. Like, the second piece of it is home inspection. And I know that, like, a lot of agents, I'm gonna put it in the context of agents, because agents naturally, like, they take on their buyers' emotions sometimes. And, in some cases they kind of input their own emotions. Well, people don't like waiving home inspection. A lot of agents don't like doing that, because they're like, oh, what if something comes up and what have you? But the reality is like, most of the better offers that come in have no home inspection, like, or limit it to, just environmental, like, meaning like a tank sweep or something like that. So, or they put in claims is not the right way of saying it. They put in additional contractual provisions that say, we're not going to waive home inspection, but we waive the first $25,000 of home inspections. Like, so they put in, like, and so what that means is, we're not going to nickel and dime. We're going to, we're going to come in and we're going to waive this amount. The problem that exists with waiving, whether you waive nothing or waive $25,000, you still have, as a buyer, the right to a home inspection. And if you have the right to a home inspection, it gives you the right to walk away from that property if there's something wrong with it. Now, I know the buyers that might watch this are like, well, I want that right. That's important to me. And I respect that. I'm not trying to push people and force people to do things that they're not comfortable with. But when you look at it from the perspective of, like, context in the marketplace, I mean, the majority of winners are waiving everything. Yep. So, it's kind of like, you have to, what I tell when I'm guiding a buyer, or when I'm guiding, an agent, is more on the agent front than buyers these days. Like, you know, I would say to them, like, listen, like, you don't have to do anything. This is like a choice. But what I would do is I would kind of make a mental list of, as, you know, what are the issues to expect in this house? And just know that, like, build in room where you have the cash to make those modifications or fixes, whatever you want to call it, should there be a problem, and waive if you can. And the only reason why is you're probably not going to get the house if you don't. And I know that that's a tough pill to swallow for some people. And I'm not trying to be like a jerk about this and say, like, waive everything, pay top dollar and deal with it. But I mean, it's really what we're dealing with in today's market. And it's kind of tough to say anything other than that. The only other answer to that is find a house that's off market. Like, I said this before, like, I was on a podcast a week ago, and I kind of got a kick out of this. A lot of people were giving me feedback on it, but it's true. Like, if you're working with an agent and your agent is sitting there looking at the MLS and just waiting for a house to pop up on the MLS, like, they're not an agent, they're a buyer. And, the truth of it is like, you need to find somebody that's going to go out and try to find you inventory. I know that we do, that's one of the things that you guys hear me talk about all the time, is like, go out and find inventory. And, we take a lot of exclusives that are like non-MLS properties. And, we definitely share, we have a holistic view on the world and how we work as an office and company. And I think we do a nice job of working with one another on that front and providing buyers with options that are not necessarily on the market, not on the MLS and what have you. But the truth of it is like, if you can't find houses that are off market right now, you're at a disadvantage. Like, you just are, because you're going to be competing with 30, 40, 50 awful. I mean, the other thing is that I didn't speak about this, but, forget about like a home sale contingency. Like,
that was actually one of our subjects, right? That came up with the community recently.
Oh, people.
Yeah, someone asked that.
Asked about what I just said before, in regards to a lot of times people are, let me start with sellers. So sellers in today's market, they're like, I'm waiting for something to buy and then I'll put my house on the market. And my answer to that is like, that's an awesome strategy if you never want to move. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, think about this logically. Like, you put your house, you're waiting to put your house on the market until you find something. And then you find something that's your dream house. And it's like, this is the one I want. And you put an offer on it that has a contingency that the sellers are never in a million years going to accept. They will never accept it because they have 14 other offers to choose from that are not maybe offers. Like, a contingency is basically stating like, I'm going to buy your house if I could sell my house. And I realize that it's like such an obvious statement to be able to sell a house in today's market, but like, a seller doesn't know if you're going to overprice it by $1 million. Like, so the seller is basically now at the mercy. They're passing up on viable offers that are ready to close in 30 days with cash, that are or waived appraisal, that have no mortgage commitment, that are probably within $5,000 to $10,000 of what you're offering anyway. And they're going to pass that up for what? For you to maybe sell your house? It's not going to happen. So it's just not, I mean, it's so unrealistic in today's market that we have all of these sellers that are thinking along those lines. And my answer to them is, there's a better strategy. Like, the better strategy is, you want to take advantage of today's market as a seller, because today's market, the prices are extreme. So the fear that comes up, and it's all driven by fear, is I'm not going to have a place to live. My family's not going to have a place to live. And I respect that wholeheartedly. Like, I have three little daughters, love of my life. And, the reality is like, I wouldn't want them to be homeless. So I get the paranoia that goes along with that. But what I would suggest is, structure your deal the right way. So, I put a deal together the other day for a family member of mine. And, the situation was like, do we buy? Do we, we want to buy, but the sellers don't want to sell because they don't have anything to go out and buy. And I said, well, why don't you structure a use and occupancy? And they said, well, what does that mean? And I say, it means that you close right away. And, you give the sellers 1 year in which to then go out and buy a house. Now, 1 year is extreme, full disclosure. That's not like the norm.
That's not norm. Yeah, that is not norm for a UNO around here. And there's some legal limits on it too, yeah?
I'll speak to that in 1 second.
Okay.
So basically, like, you know, you're correct. It's not legal. It's financial in terms of the mortgage company.
Okay.
But,
oh, right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So usually most lenders only allow for a 60-day use and occupancy.
That's right.
And so the reason that they allow for a 60-day use and occupancy is, if you think about this, there's more risk to an investment property for a lender than there is a home that that's a primary residence. Because like, if all goes wrong and you don't have any money to spend, you're going to pay your own bills first rather than the investment property. So that's why there's a risk reward thing. So they want to charge more in interest rate on investment properties than they charge on primary. Like, that's the way that it works. So they want 2-month UNO. Anything beyond that, they consider now it's like into an investment property. But the simple answer to that is, don't put it in the contract. Like, you could do a UNO and you don't put it in the contract, you put it in the cover letter, it never goes to the lender. So
right. Yeah.
Like, if you're buying a house, like, you want it to be your primary residence, but we're in a unique market. And in today's market, like, if you have to give a longer UNO, if you have the intention of moving into a primary residence, like, I would give a longer UNO, because that just makes sense in today's market. Like, so now you're giving a use and occupancy. For those that don't understand what a UNO is, use and occupancy basically is like, you're renting the sellers their house back. So, let's just say their expenses are X. Like, you say, hey, you're going to continue to pay me X for the next year. Or if your expenses are more than theirs, you could kind of work out something where it's like, you don't pay me X, you pay me X plus Y, and you're going to give me that to cover costs.
Yep.
So
and it's usually something your attorneys will write up. They'll draw up that contract so that it's mutually agreed to by both parties.
Yeah. So what it does is, like, it puts people on the clock a little bit. It gives them a year.
Yeah.
A year is a long time. Like, but what it also does, and this is what sellers kind of, if they really think about it, it actually makes them a much stronger buyer. Because if you come in, if you think about this from a negotiation standpoint, if you come in without selling your house, you're now negotiating from a point of weakness, because you're coming in and you're saying, I want to buy your house. I'll pay you X, whatever X may be, but I have a house to sell and I hope you guys are okay with this. And no seller in their right mind is going to say yes to that right now. Very few. Like, that was a very effective strategy in 2009 when people are like, I don't care, I don't have any buyers, please come.
Exactly.
Like, that's a different conversation. Like, we're not there anymore. So the strategy's changed. Like, what you're doing instead is, you're actually now, like, as soon as you close on your house, you have all the proceeds from your home. So now you might not be a cash buyer, but you're probably pretty heavy cash, because in today's market, you're selling for a premium. So, you're now able to take it. You're effectively a renter again. And as a renter, like, you don't have a contingency. So now you're coming in strapped with more cash, and you have the ability to go out and buy, knowing that you have more cash, you don't have a contingency. Like, you've flipped the script. So now you're not negotiating from a point of weakness, you're negotiating from a point of strength. Like, that to me is a no-brainer. Like, I don't know why anybody wouldn't do that today, because you're taking advantage of today's market. You're getting the buyer pool that's out there right now wants to take advantage of today's rates and lock in on a rate, like, and still have that buying power. Because they have that buying power, they could pay you a premium. So to me, it's just like, build yourself in a long UNO and sell your house. And then if in the absolute worst case scenario, a year from now, if you don't find anything, rent. Like, and I know nobody wants to hear that. They don't want to move twice. And I understand that, but like, it's still a better alternative than waiting for a house to come on the market, finding your dream home and not being able to buy it. That doesn't make any sense.
All right, Michael, I have another question. What do you think of home sale contingency for the seller? So seller, will only sell their property. They'll accept an offer, but it won't, go to close. It won't, the transaction will not be completed unless that seller has found a property to move into. What do we think about that?
I think that it's an interesting strategy. I know you and I have spoken about this before. It's something that I've I promoted for a while because, and I still promote, I'm not like backing off on that. I'm promoting it in the sense that if more sellers do that, it's going to loosen up the market.
Right.
And
exactly.
Actually,
it's matchmaking.
It's like matchmaking. Like there's a value to that.
Mm-hmm.
The only negative to it, just being real about it, and I'm not against the strategy, but the only negative is if you find a buyer like that wants to buy your house, like you're still not closed. So you're still a contingent offer, assuming you need the proceeds from your last house to buy your future house, which most people do.
Yeah.
Like, so if that's the case, then you're still at the mercy of being.
Yeah.
Seller, like you're right. Like we are contingent, but we already have our buyer and we're going to be under contract by Tuesday. Like it's a different conversation, or we're already under contract. We're just waiting to close till we found what we wanted. That's a much more palatable, like, solution to the situation than, oh, we're going to put our house on the market. Just waiting to put your house on the market. But I would say, like, in the pecking order, the best thing is doing, selling your house with a use and occupancy for an extended period of time. Next is selling your house with the contingency of we need to find something to buy in order to sell. And then third would be waiting, and you're basically waiting for whenever the market changes, because it's not going to, you're not going to find something today with those terms.
I have a question. Do you have experience of seeing lots of successful properties that are contingent sale contingent, in the sense that, like, is that, I mean, I understand how hot the market is for sellers. I completely 100% get that, and that buyers are doing backflips and all that. But, like, really, do lots of buyers, like, sign up for an indefinite possibility, of sale?
Yeah, I mean, what have you seen? Because I'm curious.
So it's awesome question. I'm glad you asked it. So real estate trends, not always, but in many instances, they move left to right, meaning like West Coast to East Coast. So I'm very, like, I've been fortunate. I have an awesome network across the country of top producing agents and brokers that I talk to regularly to hear what's going on in their markets. They hear what's going on in our market. And, through this network, I learn a lot, like, just being real about it. You always got to learn from your peers. Mm-hmm. So those people, like, that are on the West Coast that are doing this at a very high level, like, we're kind of like, similar operations that we run and stuff like that. I've heard that, like, in San Diego and in markets like that, where there's, again, such limited inventory, this is the norm. Like, everybody does that. That's just what they do straight across the board. Like, it's almost an expectation. Like, it's become the rule, not the exception. Yeah. In our market, it would be the exception, not the rule, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to work. Like, have I seen a lot of experiences of that working? I wouldn't say a lot. I have seen some, but I think that it's something that if inventory continues to stall and, continues to drag at the rate that it is, I think that it's going to become more and more of a path that people choose.
I agree.
There's no risk. If you think about it, if you're a seller and you put the house on the market and you're
a seller, if you're a buyer, there's a lot of risk because you're planning your life on something that you're not sure is going to happen or not. But I understand that if everyone did it, that it would kind of like churn up the whole system and work for everyone in everyone's favor.
So,
yeah.
What you just said is 100% correct, but I'm going to go back to the buyer side of it for a second. So I want you to think about this. Like, I mean, it's not an indefinite period of time. Like, when everything's negotiable. So just like you could I talked about the use and occupancy, segment, like, or strategy, I should say. Well, the same is true. Like, for use and occupancy, you're giving them X period of time to sell their house. You could do the exact same thing for, a contingent purchase.
That's much more reasonable. That's much more,
Yeah, you could say, like, I'm going to give you 60 days. I'm going to give you 90 days. I'm going to give you whatever it is. And the reality is like, the buyer isn't taking on that much risk, because if you think about it, it's hard to get a house in today's market.
Totally. They wouldn't be getting a house during that time anyway.
It's really hard. So, like, to guarantee a buyer that they're going to get a house in the next 30 days is like not a bet that I want to take. Like we don't even know if the right house is going to come on the market, let alone like you're going to get it with 30 offers against you. Absolutely. So knowing that, like I think that it's like it's a healthy risk for both. Like you know, and if the market changes, that equation is going to change like one way or the other. But right in today's market, I think that it's a balanced, like, you know, fair trade in terms of what people are giving up. I view it as a viable solution. It's not my favorite solution, but I would say it's my second favorite.
Yep. Okay. Good stuff. So we are approaching, well, we are past 8:30. So what haven't we talked about? What's good? Any final words, guys, that we want to impart on our colleagues, buyers and sellers?
I'll let you begin if you have something, Lisa.
I just, I feel like one of the most important things that I learned about real estate was that you can only see market shifts when you look back. Like they're happening right now. And that's something that I always come back to, you know, like next week will be like, oh, last week was like this. And, you know, even though I have no expectations that things are going to shift radically anytime soon for buyers or sellers, but you know, I think that's the really interesting thing that we always have to keep in mind is that we're always going to be in the moment. Things are micro shifting even. So I guess that's the only thing, because I think a lot of buyers, you know, in our spheres are saying, when are things going to change? And I mean, we don't know, and likely things aren't going to change radically anytime soon. But, you know, I guess that's just the thing that I always come back to, is that we think we know something and then things change because there are so many variables involved, right? So
yeah, I love that. It's
true. You need to hang in there and be very creative, as Michael has pointed out, as you've pointed out, Carla. Be creative on both sides and have faith, you know, just hang in.
Yep, and follow your gut. I mean, I think that's my thing, right? I mean, Lisa, you and I talk about this all the time. We strategize creative ways in which we can help our seller and our buyers. And the biggest thing, guys, is that, you know, we can tell you all of this great stuff and we can present all of these wonderful ideas. But it's up to you at the end of the day as to how you want to delve into a transaction. So as Lisa and I always say, we will follow your lead. And with that, Michael, anything else to say?
Yeah, I'll say this. Like years ago, I remember I was in sales. I was out of the Summit area, and by the way, I have munchkins running on the ceiling, on the floor above me.
I have munchkins too.
All I hear is I feel like it's like Fred Flintstone's feet above me.
It's like elephants.
Yeah. So what I was going to say though is like years ago, I was in the Summit market. That was where I sold, real estate. And I remember 2007, 2008, those markets. I had a beautiful home that I brought on the market in Berkeley Heights. And at the time, like that Berkeley Heights home, we got multiple offers. We got 4 offers on the house. And by the way, this is in a time period that nobody got multiple offers. Like we priced it well. We did everything right. The sellers listened. Like it was just like perfect scenario. And we got offers. The highest offer was for $1,140,000. And there was nothing that traded for anywhere close to that price range, like in the recent past before that. And so the appraiser came in and appraised it at $900,000. So this is to your point before, Lisa, when you said like, the market, is worth what a buyer's willing to pay for it. The sellers at the time were like adamant. They were like, we are not coming down off of our price. And this is what we accepted. That's fair market value. Like we'll kill the deal before we come off of it, which was a pretty harsh, position to take in the market. Like, but I respected it. Like those were my clients. And I was like, I'm going to negotiate on their behalf and say like, this is what it is. So I did. I went back to the buyer and I said, listen, $900,000 is a make-believe number. Just because some appraiser came in and said it's worth $900,000 doesn't mean that that's reality. And in reality, we had 3 other buyers besides you that were willing to pay significantly more than that number. So if this is not going to work for you, I completely respect that. But if you want this house, you're going to pay what you agreed to pay. Otherwise, we're going to move on. And the buyer's like, no, no, no. Like, fortunately, they had, you know, the funds to figure it out, and they figured it out. So here's the interesting part about this story. They closed on the house, and within 3 months after that, 5 other houses closed at similar price points. And the reason why is the appraiser now had a comp to base it off of. So what was happening is like, it was artificial. It was because there just wasn't anything that traded at that higher number to justify it. And so I always think back to that, because now here we are in today's market. Now, this is a completely different market than it was back in 2009. It's the opposite end of the spectrum. And the opposite end is happening when 40% of buyers are coming in with a waived appraisal or cash. Then what's happening is like, we're getting these higher comps that are perpetuating higher comps. Because now when there is the off chance where an appraisal is necessary, they have 15 comps to choose from, because there's so many different, you know, houses that sold. Trends do happen in real estate, and I think right now we're certainly on a high. I think it's you know, from a seller's perspective, it's a great thing. They're getting top dollar, but from a buyer's perspective, I could count. I don't even think where houses have not appraised, which ultimately that's not a bad thing for buyers either, because that means that, you know, yes, they're waiving appraisal, but they don't have to come out of pocket for the difference in cash. And I think that that's like a very unique thing about today's market. And it kind of speaks to Lisa, what you and Carla just brought up is, you know, there are trends and the market moves on a regular basis, but I think that like there's some alignment today with like appraised values and what the market is saying that it's worth and everything else. And, you know, I think that tells an interesting story in and of itself.
Fascinating. This is super interesting.
And we can go on all night, and just like the nerds that we are. I mean, I think, or at least I hope we've given some of our viewers insight into what our conversations are like around the office. And certainly when Lisa and I are together, and when we talk to Michael, which is often, we love this stuff. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Lisa or me. We would be happy to answer them. And with that, guys.
One last thing. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You can't let me go without saying this. Kudos to you guys. You guys are absolutely fantastic agents. You're even better people. And, you know, and that's not to knock you as agents, because you're amazing agents, but I sincerely love working with you. I'm blown away by what you do, you know, in design, and what you do for the community in terms of the value that you bring to the table. So it's a pleasure of mine to come on here tonight and to, you know, kind of like, you know, give my 2 cents. You know, it's always an honor to be asked to do that. And I just want to thank you guys. It's such a pleasure working with you, and I love being in your lives.
So thank you, Michael. We love that you're in our lives. So I mean, we're so fortunate. Yeah, we are so fortunate and so grateful that we have you and Coldwell Banker. So you're the best. Thank you so much.
Very much.
Thank you, MP. Right. We love you.
I appreciate it.
And we'll see everybody soon. Thanks, guys.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.